order the adjourned meeting for Tuesday, January 17th, 2006. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. We'll have roll call, please.
Arbogast.
Here.
Garnis.
Here.
Gisselbeck.
Here.
Heller.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Meisenheimer.
Here.
Solberg. Walder and Wilson are both absent. York.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 2 is the motion to approve the minutes of the City Council meeting of January 3rd, 2006.
So move.
So moved by Mr. Heller. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Solberg. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Agenda item number 2 is first reading of ordinance number 06-01, rezoning lots 31 through 36, block 55, a replat of West Watertown Edition. Rick?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, members of the City Council. This is only a first reading of ordinance number 0601 to rezone some property. This ordinance has been prepared by staff in response to a petition that's been submitted to the Mayor and the City Council by Mr. Doug Engels. Mr. Engels is here in the audience, so if you would have questions and wish to ask them of him or just have a short discussion, even though it is first reading, he is available to for that purpose. The petition calls for lots 31 through 36 of Block 55, replat of West Watertown, to be rezoned from its current zoning designation of R4, which is our manufactured residential district, to be rezoned to a C3, which is our highway commercial district. The ordinance does reflect that requested change. Is everyone familiar with its location, or are there any questions of me at this time?
Has this been before the Planning Commission?
It has been before the Planning Commission. On December 22nd, it was considered by the Plan Commission. We've also introduced it to the City Council briefly in our discussions of January 10th. This is the first reading. The second reading is scheduled then for February 6th, at which time we'll have a public hearing in this regard.
Rick, before the public hearing, do letters go out to the immediate neighborhood just like they do for any variance that people are asking for?
Yes.
So they've actually gotten a registered letter in the mail so everybody will know about it before that public hearing?
The way we handled it was we handled the public hearing. I should back up. The public hearing itself for the City Council will be public notice in the Watertown Public Opinion. When we received the request for rezoning, we did save the applicants some money. We set up public hearings for the Plan Commission, and when the first reading and the second reading and the public hearing for this council would be held, that information, I will say, called for this to be the evening for the public hearing, but we've delayed that for a week just so we could work through some issues with the applicant. But the adjacent property owners are on notice and have been, even starting with the public hearing before the Plan Commission, that this is an item for discussion.
Is there anyone else have any questions or would like to speak with Mr. Engels? Thank you, Rick. If not, we'll move on to agenda item number 3 then. Adoption of a moratorium on receiving applications for on and off premises signs. Resolution number 06-04. Rick?
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll introduce this, and I noticed one of our Plan Commission members, our Vice Chair, Brian Pellish, is here, so if you have questions, he's been involved with the evolution of this sign code update from its inception, which has been approaching probably 2 years ago now. But in our discussion with the Plan Commission on January 4th, the sign code had come to the point where the Plan Commission said, this is what we think we ought to take to the public. Let's get this published, and we have done that, we as being staff. We have shared hard copies with the 3 organizations in town that we could think of in terms of installers, that being Persona, Stein Sign Display, and Service Signs and Sales, and asked for their comments. The Plan Commission on January 4th, part of the discussion has been what happens when this does hit the street. There might be the opportunity or the proliferation of applications for signs that might, the intent being to kind of slide under the wire. How should we handle that? And we discussed this with the Plan Commission on the 4th and December 13th with the Public Works Committee. The recommendation from both those bodies is let's, to a certain extent, control that by placing a moratorium both on on-premise signs and off-premise signs. Off-premise signs, previously referred to as perhaps billboards. You recall that this council has placed a moratorium which still exists today on off-premise signage. The moratorium that is suggested in the resolution 06-04, which is in your packet, suggests that that moratorium then also include on-premise signs. It really applies, and the concern in both discussions with the Plan Commission and the Public Works Committee is, what about a new business that's starting up or the one that's relocating during this time frame in which a moratorium is in effect? How can they get a brand on their building so people can find them? And that has been addressed in here by saying that we're not going to receive applications for on and off premise signs that don't comply with the intent of the new proposed ordinance. So there is that window if a sign application comes in that meets the intent of the proposal, our building official, Ken Buchholz, is able to sign off on that and issue the sign permit.
Has there been any slipping under the wire already on these signs?
I don't believe so. We experienced this a little bit with the off-premise signs, but we had good luck when we met with the applicants in that regard, and we developed signs on a number of them anyway that complied with the ordinance. But on this, in terms of on-premise signs, no, we haven't seen that.
I suppose for discussion purposes, we should have a motion.
For discussion, I'll make a motion to approve the moratorium.
Motion by Alderman Johnson. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Alderman York. Any further discussion?
I might point out that the public opinion has been really good at helping us out with getting the word on the street, and we've taken the opportunity to mention it on GovTV, and like I say, we've distributed copies to our local sign installers. We'll be having a public involvement opportunity with the Plan Commission at their meeting this Thursday at 5:15. And depending on how that goes, if there's good reception, we could see, we being the City Council, a first reading of that ordinance on February 6th. You know, and if things follow, then we would be set up for a second reading and public hearing and adoption on the 21st of February. Probably publish it on the 25th of February, full effect unless it's referred on March 17th would be the schedules, to give you an idea.
Paul,
Yes,
I
Alderman
talked
Silber.
to a gentleman at Service Sign, and I think he's here to talk about one issue that's within the moratorium that he would like to discuss. Is Bill from Service Sign here?
You have to state your name and the mic, Bill, for us.
My name's Bill Ortmeyer with Service Signs. My biggest concern on the ordinance mainly excuse me, mainly is the engineering for 50 square feet or less. It's going to cost as much to do the engineering and the soil testing to put up a 5x10 sign than it costs to put the sign up. And that's one of my biggest concerns is when the small business person, it's going to cost them needless dollars, where they don't need to do it before. There's not a city in this state. I've been selling signs for 17 years. There's not a city in the state that requires it that I know of. I mean, Rapid City doesn't, Sioux Falls doesn't, Huron doesn't, Aberdeen doesn't. All the ones I work with in North Dakota and Minnesota doesn't require that. They'll take them if you have them, but they don't require you to do engineered drawings. It's a big expense, and especially for the small public, small business person, to put up a sign, to have incur that cost. It really isn't fair for them. It's one of my main concerns. There's one other, on the small signs for like the elections, those are downsized from 32 to 16. I kind of question that because they'll put up 2 16s instead of 132. I think, if you're putting up election signs, you put out as many as you feel is adequate to cover your basis. Whether if they got smaller, you're going to put more of them out. So I kind of question the situation there. And the people that have made up and want to run for election again, they'll have to change them all too. So that's the main ones that I could see in there. Is going to be a problem.
Bill, I got a question. You mentioned to me that when you're making a 50 square foot sign or that you've got a computer model that will show you the wind factor and what is required to take
Yes, we
on
use-
a
we-
high wind.
We use a standard sign industry wind load charts for not only the structural steel but also the footings. And just tonight I've given those to Rick, and I think that might be a real good quick reference for the city to look at whoever's putting up a sign if they're putting it up properly or not. That's exactly the way Rapid does it. They don't require the engineering, but they also have a quick reference guide to kind of look at what's going on and saying, okay, they're in there at 90 mile an hour wind load, 100 mile an hour wind load, right where they need to be. They're not in there at 50 where it's going to go down if we get a slight storm type of thing.
And then just a little comment on political signs. I know 32 square foot sign costs approximately the same as a 16-foot sign when you really get down to making the sign pretty close. And
They are going to be, depending on.
And I noticed in the last election, especially in the national and the state elections, that many of the people had 32 square foot signs. So I think that might be a restriction that we might want to look at.
Well, Bill, you'll be sure and appear at the public hearing so they can take your testimony again, so that, because, these are some good points that they might want to consider, so,
I'll be there.
okay.
Thanks.
Do we have any comments from the folks that are working on the sign ordinance of why did we go over the top as compared to what other cities are doing?
One, I'd certainly defer to Brian Pellish, who spent
I seen Brian back
two
there.
years working on the subcommittee along with Stanton Fox and a few other people. And I would also comment that staff intends to make some phone calls to other communities between now and the public hearing Thursday night to find out, having a concern about the 50-foot sign is one concern. Our concern from a staff perspective is the relief of liability that the city could incur when you have the bad situation happen. So we want to find out what the other communities are doing to address that portion of the issue.
Very good, thank you.
Well, I don't think we're going to get into the merits of the ordinance at this time. This is strictly has to do with the moratorium.
Right.
The ordinance will be taken care of later.
And that's fine, I can save my questions for later.
Would you like to say something, Steve? Or?
Yes, I would. My name is Steve Hauk. I'm with a new business startup that's starting out east of town, Fireside Camper. Myself and two other partners. One of my partners is here with me. And this moratorium does affect us. We have been in the works for the past couple months with the sign companies to get a sign. We have put money forth for a sign. The sign is approximately 10 by 20 foot. So we did not budget money for engineering and all that because it was not needed at the time. The sign was designed for a 40-foot pole, which at the time signage was that's what the current ordinance allows. Now our building is in the county. However, we've been under the understanding that because we're within 3 miles, the county is going to abide by whatever the city proposes for signage. And so I guess we're not trying to slide under the gun, but this is something that does concern us greatly. And I guess I don't know what we can do or what the council is at liberty to do with our particular situation. There is a concern with us. Let me just give you a little background on our sign. It is 10 by 20. It was designed to be on a 40-foot pole with the idea that we would also, being we're going to be opening up a campground out there, would be able to in the future and on the permit would be applying for additional signage right underneath there to indicate campground, just the word campground. It is kind of a safety issue out there, being as our building is so far from the 43rd Street entrance into our property. And what we don't want, or we plan on placing our signage at the entrance, and what we don't want to have happen is people pass that entrance and then try to not be able to find an entrance into our building and then try to turn around on 212. So therefore, we feel we're going to need both of those signs on there. We lower that thing down, it's going to be awful tough to do. These are just some of the things that we consider, and so this moratorium will affect us, yes.
What does staff have to say about that?
If I could, Mr. Heller, I don't know that, forgive me, that I'll respond directly to your question, but perhaps the question's properly put to the building official, Ken. I'm wondering if the county, as a matter of course, approaches you when a sign's being erected within like a mile of the city and asks for your input with regard to the new sign code requirements and whether or not a sign that's being proposed in the county. I guess what I'm wondering is, how often are you approached when signs are being erected outside of the city to weigh in and let them know what the code requirements are within the city, if ever? So I guess what I'm wondering is, why are we going to get involved in the case of Mr. Hauk's sign, or aren't we? Has the Planning and Zoning Department from the county requested that we do that?
The city has, as we work through the plat, the plat conditions that allowed fireside campers to proceed, that was one of the requests that the city made be entered into by the developers, between the developers and the county as a condition of plat approval, and that was to comply, as I recall, with the sign ordinance, the proposed sign ordinance.
That was item
And
number
that's
3 of their letter of assurance, that they would in fact comply with the city's sign ordinance, whatever that was, knowing that the city was in the process of going to adopt a new one.
May I address that issue? That is interpreted by the city different than the way it is interpreted by us as owners. And also it says general conformance. I mean, this moratorium is going to affect us the way this sign has been designed. And so we are in the county. However, it seems like we're being tossed between the county and the city because we're in that 3-mile radius. And so I'm asking for some direction, or in this particular instance, is there anything that can be done?
Did you say your sign that you have planned will be not in compliance with our new sign ordinance? Will his sign be out of compliance?
My understanding is that if it doesn't have an approved engineer design under the proposed code that obviously isn't even before you tonight.
That's the part
but
of it that would be out of compliance.
That's my understanding from Mr. Hauk's comments, that's the part that's lacking.
I think it's also whether you're 40 feet or 30 feet high. You know, so you're talking 10 foot of difference here, and his sign probably could go on a 30-foot pole, but it was designed for a 40-foot pole.
That was based on the recommendations of the sign company. That was what they were at latitude to have at the time when we started design work. Also, like I said, the engineering that's in the proposed, we have not budgeted for that, which is an expense to us. That, like I said, on new startup businesses, it causes some hardships. So I don't know if there's any leniency there, or I shouldn't say leniency, but some consideration for new businesses. Like I said, we're not trying to get anything under the gun. It just happens to be the timing of the whole thing.
If I could, Mayor, ask Mr. Hauk a question. It appears, based on driving past there, that obviously you've already gotten a building permit because construction's begun, but did the county not, at the time they issued the building permit, also in the same permit issuance, issue a permit for the sign, or is that an afterthought?
No, we did not at the time apply for a permit for signage. At that time, we were unaware of for sure where we were going to place that sign. We gave that more consideration and thought, due to safety reasons, we needed to have it down by the entrance. We just don't want people trying to turn around. Just the lay of the land there, if you've been out that way, our building is a ways away from that entrance, and we don't want people to pass that entrance and then try to turn around on 212 to try to come back to enter the property.
Stanton, if we adopt this moratorium, this moratorium really mirrors the proposed sign ordinance that we'll be voting on in the future, correct?
The language of the moratorium suggests that any new sign permits that are issued, that construction, design, and all those things need to comply with the proposed draft ordinance. Now, we all have to acknowledge that if the moratorium's adopted tonight until the actual sign code is implemented, we may, through first reading and second reading, have further revisions to the sign code. So the moratorium may be sort of a moving target, but once the moratorium is adopted, the implication, the effect is going to be that from this date forward, whatever the proposed sign code regulations are, any new sign permit that's issued is going to be issued in conformance with the draft sign ordinance, if that's responsive.
Mr. Pellish, you have something to say to us, please?
Brian Pellish, I'm from the Planning Commission. I can't give you any great words of wisdom, but maybe I can give you a little insight on the engineered design and what our spirit and intent was, maybe help out this individual. We left that portion of the proposed ordinance a little bit open to give both the applicant and the city engineering group some latitude to work with the applicant to make sure that we tried to get things through with as much flexibility. So in the particular situation we're talking about tonight, an engineered design, what is it that we're saying? The spirit and the intent that we put into the ordinance is that they are using reputable standards from the sign industry. There are defined standards, and as I recall, I thought I heard him say his sign contractor has got plans and things. Those are very common in the signage industry, and we would expect them to present those to the building official both now and after the ordinance. If at that time we're looking at a very large three-sided billboard off-premises type arrangement, Ken would at his discretion say, I think we need to have what we would call a PE's approval on that design. It's very complicated, wind loads. And if it's a small design, under 50 feet, it could be as simple as they talked about the wind charts that were presented, and it shows a table of how high versus how deep the footings are. That could be construed by the building official as an engineered design. So there's some latitude there, but from our standpoint, we really didn't want to write the ordinance that said every sign permit that comes in, large or small, will have a PE stamp on it. So there is some latitude there for the city to work with, even in this situation. The height, I can't speak to it. I don't recollect off the top of my head what the ordinance is.
And if I could, Mayor, to Mr. Pellish's point about the latitude, in the draft that's going to be before you at some point, probably in the near future, the definition of approved engineered design is one which bears the insignia of a registered professional engineer, the PE, or other indicia which demonstrates the sign to be installed has been designed in accordance with the requirements of this ordinance. So it's not necessarily the case that every sign has to have a PE stamp on it and have a registered professional engineer's stamp of approval on it. There can be other indicia which the building official is satisfied with that could still allow the sign permit to be issued.
So if I understand correctly, Steve, you could go and work with Ken on that then and come to a resolution on your sign?
Yeah, that would be fine. We just need to make sure that we get our building permit issued, even if this moratorium goes through, that I can go get a building permit tomorrow, and because the sign is being shipped, it's gonna be here the first week. Our opening is the 1st of March, so.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try this, Mr. Houck. I'm gonna
Yes.
make a motion that we make an exception for a Fireside Campers sign that they have designed.
You want to replace that motion?
Well-
How do we go about doing this
This would
then?
be like an amendment. to
Amendment? Okay. So we've had a motion to amend the motion to allow a special exception for Mr. Houck. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded that by Mr. Meisenheimer. Then is there any further discussion? If not, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Then you have to vote on then we're back to the main motion.
Okay, now we're back to the main motion. As amended. And so, let's see, there's been a first and a second. So is all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you for helping me. Item number 4 is the amendments to the 2006 salary resolution, resolution number 0605. Tracy?
Thank you. The council approved the 2006 salary resolutions at their January 3rd meeting, and after that meeting, we discovered that there were a couple of errors actually in the resolution, so this would correct those mistakes. I would ask for your approval.
Have a motion for that, please?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Heller, seconded by Alderman Giselbeck. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 6 is the Veterans Memorial Project update from Ordine Bierman. Ordine?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Ordine Bierman. I'm a member of the Veterans Memorial Committee. Our regular spokesman, Leroy Anderson, went south for a much-needed vacation and left me here to make the report. With his efforts, though, I want to thank the City Council for all your support and donation, along with the Watertown Foundation and currently 26 other corporations and companies that have supported us. We are about 100% funded towards the project, our gold project. Contractors are being finalized with some labor and material donated. We have acquired Mr. David Todd, our architect, to oversee construction and specification and codes, as well as contractors. One area we feel that we are behind in, and that is receiving the number of veterans for our wall. At first we thought we didn't design the wall large enough to hold all our veterans, and now we're having a little bit of a difficulty bringing them in and signing up. We have 582 names at the present time. We are using local radio, public service announcements, and 25 different surrounding little county or town newspapers, and they are working very well. We will be attending the Winter Farm Show here the first week in February and meeting the people and trying to get our message out to the veterans. Recently, we've received calls from California, North Carolina, Arizona, and the other day from Montana when she got her South Shore paper she gets every month and read about it there. Some of our sponsors are sponsoring their veterans. They're paying for their entire veterans that are working at their corporation, their employees. And things like this really excite me to think that we are doing the right thing. Are there any questions?
Does the council members have any questions for Ordine?
Just a question, have you surveyed why veterans aren't coming forth?
Some of the times they aren't aware of it. We're not getting the message out enough. We'll have somebody on the radio, and then shortly thereafter I'll get a phone call and say, this is the first I've heard about it. And I don't know how much more we can do. You know, we think we're doing about as much as we can, and yet we're just not getting the message to everybody. And that's one of the reasons.
Ordine?
Yes.
How many names?
We have 582 names now.
And how many would you like?
I would like, at some time this fall during dedication, that we have 1,200.
1,200?
That would fill our front of our wall.
Okay, thanks.
We have capacity for 2,500, almost 2,500.
For your information, Ordine, the Military Affairs Committee of the Chamber is putting, I believe it's 2 different stories in regarding the foundation into the Chamber newsletter. I believe it's due next month.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments for Ordine? If not, thank you very much, Ordine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Item number 7 is the consideration of a grant application from the Watertown Community, Item number 6 is flood insurance rate map update. I'm very sorry about that. Herb?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. What I'm going to cover tonight, a lot of it was probably covered last week in the Public Opinions article on the flood insurance study update, but I know some people don't get the paper, and and there may be some folks out there that aren't aware, so I'm going to go back and just recap some of the highlights that we know as a result of receiving the information from FEMA. I will add that no city council action is required tonight. At the end of December, the city received the preliminary digital flood insurance rate map and the flood insurance study from FEMA. These products represented the culmination of a FEMA-driven formal flood insurance rate study, which has been ongoing since 1999. The city's been in contact with FEMA representatives to discuss and consider a community coordination meeting. While the format for the meeting hasn't been finalized, it does look like meetings to discuss the study will occur during the second week of February. This meeting will allow FEMA officials to discuss the flood insurance study process and to provide an explanation of the information the city's received. The city was given 30 days from the receipt of the study to identify changes or corrections to non-technical information such as corporate limits, road names, bridges, streams, and other information presented in either the map or the flood insurance study report. To date, we haven't identified any major non-technical issues, although we will submit some boundary changes to the edge of the city as well as street additions that'll be provided to FEMA for inclusion in their final report. At the end of the 30-day review period, FEMA will issue a statutory 90-day appeal period for new or modified base flood elevations. This process will allow both elected officials and members of the public to provide specific input and feedback on specific locations within the area that could present potential issues or errors in the revision. After the appeal period is ended, the FEMA will prepare a final report which will be released to the city approximately 6 months later. In essence, what this tells us is by the end of 2006, the city will have a new flood insurance map. I will add that prior to the effective date of the final map and report, the city will be required to adopt a new floodplain ordinance or modify the existing ordinance to include reference to the rate map and new effective date. Certainly participation in the revision of the ordinance and adoption of a flood insurance map is voluntary, but at least in my estimation, and I think in the estimation of many others, that wouldn't be a smart decision not to be involved, because if we should have another disaster in the future, that would preclude the city from being able to participate and being able to recoup disaster costs in terms of financial aid from the federal government. While most of the city isn't directly affected by the revision of the flood insurance map, portions of South and Southwest Watertown that were impacted by the 1997 flood will be. Also, for new development around Lake Compesca, building structures will be required to construct their floor elevations above 1724.8 feet mean sea level. This represents approximately a 2.1 foot increase above the previous elevation established in the 1989 flood insurance map study. New structures around Lake Pelican will be required to construct their floor elevations above 17.0 feet mean sea level, which is an increase of approximately 0.7 feet or less than 1 foot above the previous elevation. We purposely don't have a map up tonight because the information we've got so far is in paper form, not digital form. It would be very hard to depict it and have it mean anything to the viewing public. We do expect to have digital information here from FEMA shortly. And as a matter of course, and we're seeing on an average about 5 people a day since the article went out, we would certainly encourage both homeowners and business owners that may have questions about the map, whether their particular structure is impacted, to come to City Hall, second floor. We have staff available that can certainly show them the map and answer what questions they might have, and then we'll be coming out with more information through the press to inform them of the meeting times and the process that we would expect to go through when representatives from FEMA come here. Again, no council action required, but I'd be happy to answer any questions, or other members of staff would be also.
There may be a question out there, how do they go about finding the elevation of their current homes?
The only way that we know of is through using a surveying firm, and I'm not going to plug any local firms, but we've got engineering firms in town that do surveying, and they can come out and do a survey elevations on the particular lot, and that'll be the evidence that FEMA will need to identify and make the decision on whether or not that structure is or is not in the floodplain.
What's the price range of a procedure like that, Herb? Do you know, or?
I don't have a clue.
Okay.
Herb, when we get this digital map, will this be put on the Watertown website so that people can go on there and see what the map is?
At some point, I believe we can say it will be. I will tell you that in our discussions with FEMA so far, they've cautioned us about doing that because this information is still preliminary and could in fact change before the final study is done. So certainly at your direction as a city council, we'll advise you. My guess is we probably will.
I think it'll be very important in the 90-day comment period that's coming up that people see that map and understand clearly where their house lies in it. In general, there probably will be about 50 new blocks of Watertown, of the city proper, that will be touched by this new flood map. In addition, at Lake Compesca, in general, anybody that had water or was close to having water in the 1997 flood is probably going to be in the new flood zone. That's probably a couple hundred new homes at the lake, and so it's a map that's going to have a dramatic effect on our community. Anybody that takes out a mortgage on their house that is in a flood zone will be required to carry flood insurance. If you don't have a mortgage, you're not required to have flood insurance. But that insurance can cost, for example, I believe $100,000 worth of value would cost you about $600 in insurance, and for a commercial property it would be even more than that. So it's a new expense that people are going to have to take on. It's essentially at this point the federal government's response to Watertown's flood problem. We can't stop the water from coming, but we can do what we can to protect the economic character of the community. So right now it's an expense that a lot of us are going to have to bear, and there's not much choice in the matter.
Any other comments from council? If not, thank you. Herb? Item number 7 is consideration of a grant application from the Watertown Community Foundation Youth Council for $3,000. Tracy?
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. Captain Schaefer from the Police Department. I'm going to let James do most of the talking. But in a nutshell, we're here this evening. We're in the early development process of coming up with a new youth program that will be held this summer. And we're going to tell you about that program and our plan to fund that. James Albert, today is a patrol officer starting the new school year in August, September. He will assume the duties as the new school resource officer. He's been one of the driving factors behind this program, so I'm going to let him go ahead and explain what it is in our plan, and we'll have questions when he's done.
Thank you. As Tracy Schaefer said, my name is James Albert from the Watertown Police Department. I'm very excited to have a chance to talk to you all today and talk to you about the debut of this program. Just a little background on the program. The reason that we came up with this is to help the area youth prior to 6th grade. We don't have much contact with youth prior to 6th grade aside from the DARE program and school Adopt a Cop program through the Watertown Police Department. That's why we're going to do this program. The program is called Camp Chance. It's a proactive youth program that reaches out to children who are at risk due to their economic background, the environment they live in, or children that are abused, abandoned, or neglected. The term at risk also reaches out to children who live ordinary lives but face temptations societies and peers place on them. Camp Chance is designed to teach anger management, self-esteem, teamwork, promote drug and alcohol-free living, and most importantly, show them that there are people who care about them and places to turn when they need help. The camp is designed to give the children a learning environment as well as activities that will be a first-time experience for many of the children. Some of the possible activities are fishing, canoeing, jet ski rides, jet boat rides, paddle boating, trips to the zoo, hiking, arts and crafts, and that's just to name a few. On the educational side, we have food safety and preparation, personal hygiene, self-esteem building, anger management, classes to resist peer pressure, and the reality of drug and alcohol abuse. Again, this is just to name a few of the possible classes. The program focuses on reducing violence, drug and alcohol abuse, and negative behavior. Camp Chance increases self-esteem, communication, cooperation, and teamwork. As a part of the Camp Chance initiative, a steering committee is being formed. The purpose of the steering committee is to work together as a community to develop, plan, and implement the program. The selection process is another thing. Children are selected by school resource officers, teachers, caseworkers, law enforcement officers, and parents who think their child will benefit from attending the camp. The selection process is in place to ensure that the children who need the most, who need the camp the most, are the ones that attend. Camp Chance will operate during the month of July. Each child will attend a 3-day session. There's going to be 3 sessions with approximately 30 students per session, for a total of 90 students. They're broken down into age and grade categories. For example, one age group will be 1st and 2nd grade students. The next group will be 3rd and 4th grade, and the last group will be 5th and 6th grade. And the reason for that is so that it will allow us to provide activities that are acceptable to each of the age groups. Camp Chance is going to be funded completely by donations from the citizens and businesses of Cottington County and the city of Watertown. Camp Chance will be staffed by local law enforcement officer volunteers along with local citizens and organizations. With the staffing being provided by law enforcement agencies and the community, 100% of all donations go directly towards the children who attend. Camp is going to be free to all the children who attend. Each child will receive a t-shirt, a ball cap, and meals in addition to the camp activities. However, the estimated average cost to run the camp is approximately $57 a child. At this time, I have a grant application for the Watertown Community Foundation for a grant for up to $5,500 to be used for youth serving organizations. At this time, I'd like to request authorization to apply for that grant.
Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Mr. Garnos and seconded by Mr. Solberg. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Very good. Thank you. Next, we have the library project. There's 4 items. The authorization for advertising for bids, the underwriter selection. C is the bond disclosure council selection. And D is the bond resolution, which is resolution number 06-06. And Dave Weigel from the library board.
Greetings, Mayor Fox, City Council, and staff. My name is Dave Weigel. I'm president of the Watertown Regional Library Board, and I'm here to request authorization to advertise for bids for the library expansion. We have 2 separate but related requests that need to go out. One is for a building project, and the second is for asbestos removal. And that's a reference to letter A.
So could we have a motion then to authorize?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Solberg. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mrs. York. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. And I'll defer the B, C, and D to Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. The remaining 3 items on this under the library project agenda item can be covered in one council action. I do want to take a minute just to cover each of those individually. The underwriter selection, the finance committee has addressed that, as well as the bond and disclosure council selection. Doherty Company has agreed to handle the library bond financing for the same fees that we paid them for the aquatic center financing, and so that is the Doherty will be the underwriter. And the bond council selection, we did receive two proposals with Dorsey and Whitney out of their Minneapolis office providing the lowest fee. It's actually a $10,000 fee to provide the bond and disclosure council services for this financing. Both of those items are addressed in the bond resolution. In addition, the resolution also takes 12 pages to say just really a very few things. Essentially, the bond resolution authorizes the sale of up to $5 million in bonds for the project. We certainly we're going to get our $10,000 money's worth out of that bond council, because he took him 12 pages to say about a half a dozen items here. But the resolution also authorizes the mayor and the finance officer and the city attorney to execute all the necessary documents to complete the bond financing for the library project. The resolution sets out the various repayment provisions so that it's very clear to the bondholders, whoever they may be over the course of the 20 years, they will know from the resolution how and when they will receive payment of their principal and interest. And a very important part of the bond resolution is that it pledges a portion of our capital improvement sales tax revenues for the period of the bond toward payment of bond principal and interest, and that's very very important. That is the same pledge that we've made on previous sales tax bond issues, and so we've maintained a consistent level of pledging, and that's the security really that the bondholders or bond investors rely on to determine how safe a particular bond issue is. It's also critical when it comes time to get our bonds rated. The resolution also restricts how the bond proceeds can be used, and of course, as you might expect, the use of those proceeds are restricted to the remodeling and expansion of the library, the actual construction, architectural, engineering costs, asbestos abatement and removal that Dave mentioned, paying the cost of financing, as well as funding a reserve account that we are required to provide. The resolution will set out the limits on the issuance of future bonds, just as past resolutions have set out limits within which we must live in issuing the library bonds. And the resolution also obligates the city to maintain records and continue to provide ongoing information, making that information available to bondholders over the life of the bond issue, so that they can get up-to-date information on how secure their investment continues to be in terms of the revenue that they're relying on to make those repayments. I guess that's really a thumbnail sketch, kind of boiling it down in terms of what's included in this resolution. If you do have any questions, I would certainly try to answer those, but I would recommend approval of this, and this will be published as all resolutions are, and would be in effect prior to award of the construction and asbestos removal contracts, which we're anticipating will be on the 6th of March.
Okay, we have a motion then
So
to,
moved.
so moved by Mr. Garnos. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Giselbeck. Is there any further discussions or questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Tracy. $5 million goes quick.
That's
Agenda item number 9 is the addendum to the Boys and Girls Club lease agreement. Brad?
Well, after some negotiation with the Boys and Girls Club Executive Committee, we have come up with a new 5-year addendum to a lease that was entered into with the Boys and Girls Club back in 1985. And at that point, there was an agreement that the city would provide 47.92% of the of rec center revenues to the Boys and Girls Club, because of the fact that they had raised that amount of money to help with the construction of the rec center and the Boys and Girls Club. And then again in 1997 they assisted in raising 50% or more of the money needed to fund the club. But rather than just follow the exact guideline of that, because there's so many loose ends to it, we negotiated this 5-year agreement, and it would require the city in the first year to provide $175,000 towards the Boys and Girls Club budget, and $170,000 in each of those years after that. That represents about 15% of their overall budget, which is about $1.2 million. And just to give you a little idea of the growth of the Boys and Girls Club, back in 1992, they were operating on a budget of about $236,000, serving about 96 kids a day. And today, with about 12 employees in one location, and today they're serving over 500 kids a day in 8 locations with a $1.2 million budget and 55 full and part-time employees. And as indicated just recently at the grant that we just approved, we need to invest in our children and in this community, and that is what this provides us the opportunity to do. This is a partnership between the city and the Boys and Girls Club to provide the young people in our community with the best possible chance to succeed that we can give them. And this is as I said, only 15% of the budget, so all those businesses out there that donate money to the Boys and Girls Club, keep donating, because this is an ongoing thing that the city does regularly, and will continue to do because of the lease that we entered into. Now, as I mentioned, there are some loose ends with that lease, and part of the agreement as well is that we want to make an effort this year to either rewrite the lease or come up with something different that gets rid of the loose ends. We would like to do something that's more permanent so that we're not back with agreement, 5-year agreements or whatever. So we're going to take a look at that this coming year. This, I believe, has been approved by the executive board of the Boys and Girls Club, and will go before their full board maybe later this week or early part of next week. And but I guess I would make the motion that we approve the agreement and lease agreement and proceed from there.
Okay, we need to have an authorization for the mayor to sign this addendum. Is there a motion?
I just made that motion.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Arbogast. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Brad. Agenda item number 10 is the approve the renewal of a general liability, public officials liability, law enforcement liability, and auto physical damage and auto liability insurance policy with the SDPAA and authorized payment of premium. Tracy.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a request that I've put on the agenda. This is a policy that we renew each year. It renews on February 1st. This provides all the coverages that you've just mentioned that relate to liability, as well as the auto physical damage portion of our coverage. The city's the municipal utility department also is covered under this policy, and they pay the portion of the premium that relates to their exposures, their vehicles, and so forth. The city's share that I'm asking for your approval to pay tonight is $134,141.60. That represents an increase over last year of about 6.5%.
Let's see. May I have a motion then to authorize the payment to the premium?
So move.
So moved by Mr. Meisenheimer. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Heller. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 11 is the open, and we have several items on the open. Beginning with agenda item number 1 on the open is a motion to authorize the mayor to sign an agreement with Health Analytics to conduct a study of the city's ambulance and fire services. And Brad, again?
Well, last fall, it came to our attention that we were struggling with overtime in our fire department to keep pace with the demands for ambulance service in our community and in the surrounding area. And in light of the growth at the hospital and the emergency room, we determined that it was necessary to take a comprehensive look at our ambulance system, our fire rescue system essentially in this community, and determine where we're at, where we need to go, and how do we get there. And we solicited proposals from two nationally recognized firms, one of which is Health Analytics, and the second one was Fitch and Associates. And both of these firms have expertise in examining ambulance systems, and we decided through the finance committee we had selected Health Analytics. They are based out of Florida but have a relationship with I believe it's the University of Arizona as well, and they bring to the table both a combination of ambulance systems. They have a health analytics division, and they have a fire analytics division, and what we are asking them to do is to see how we are performing as in relationship to the demands of the hospital, which really serves about a 10-county area. Our ambulance system, while it is the City of Watertown's ambulance system, really is a regional ambulance system, and so we need to know how that system is operating, what we can do to make it operate better, how we can integrate with surrounding volunteer ambulance systems to provide service, to look at adequacy of our facilities. Do we need other locations to improve response times? Do we need personnel? How do we, and how do we budget for that? Also, we're going to ask them to take a look at the collections, because the system is changing rapidly, and it's difficult for everybody to keep up with all the changes at the federal level. So we're going to ask them to take a very comprehensive look at what we have and look for their recommendations, how to make sure that our ambulance is the best that can be in this part of the state. So the recommendation of the Finance Committee is to enter into a contract with Health Analytics for a fee of $30,000, and within about 100 days we ought to have a report.
So with that, could we have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mrs. Arbogast. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Alderman Johnson. Is there any further discussion?
Well, are we getting some help from paying for that thing from the hospital or not?
They had offered to participate in that, but there have been some discussion among council members that perhaps that the city ought to just take this expense on, because it's our ambulance system that we're analyzing, and so the recommendation would be that the city pay the full amount of the fee, and it would have to come out of a contingency. Is that correct, Tracy? Because we didn't really have this budgeted last fall.
Right, the fees for this study had not been budgeted. I guess contingency would be one alternative. The other that was discussed was to utilize a portion of the funds that were budgeted for the public safety and city hall study. So that those were the two alternatives that we identified.
And this is something that our fire department is in favor. You're backing it, Mike? Is that okay? It just occurs, sometimes it occurs to me that when you make the decision to ask the question, you better be ready for the answer.
Well, I believe we're fully ready for the answer, yeah. We definitely need to proceed with this one, so.
However, there may be some questions whether council is ready for the answer.
And I think this company brings a very independent view to the table, and I don't think there will be, I mean, there's no hidden agendas or anything in here at all. And this is about as unbiased of a study that we can get, and that's what we want, because we want to be able to tell the community that we've looked at every aspect of this, and this is our roadmap.
Any other discussion items? If not, then all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Open item number number 2 is the motion to accept a warranty deed for Lot 19 of Putter's Green subdivision. Dave?
Good evening. You have before you a warranty deed for Lot 19 of Putter's Green subdivision. When this lot was platted, it had a drainage easement on the total lot. This is an area that is needed for the drainage that goes between the municipal golf course and the airport. And the developer agreed to deed this to the city at no cost to the city, and I'm here to ask for your acceptance of this deed.
May I have a motion then to accept? So moved by Mr. Giselbeck. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Weisenheimer. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, Dave, is there going to be some cost to the city to develop the drainage on this lot?
No, I don't believe there'll be any cost as far as developing the drainage. There will be some cost as far as maintaining this lot. It is right adjacent to the golf course and can be done in conjunction with the mowing on the golf course.
Any other questions? If not, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Dave. Open item number 3 is a motion to authorize a grant application to the South Dakota Department of Transportation for Lura Township, Grant County, road improvements as part of the Upper Big Sioux River Watershed Project. And
Good evening, Council. My name is Roger Foote. I'm here on behalf of Mike Williams, who couldn't make it tonight. Just a brief word of what we're doing. We have a project up in Lura Township in Grant County that has been, it's a small project, but there's a big price tag to it, so we haven't been able to address that with our project funds. Until Mike found the South Dakota Department of Transportation Enhancement Program, and they are willing to do the cost share program with us, and we'll be using Grant County and Lura Township as co-sponsors. We'd like to work this the same way that our current project is working, the same administration, but it's for a single project. We're looking at about 2,000 feet of township road with Indian Creek that flows directly through it. There are some existing culverts there that, every couple of years the ice comes down and washes it all out. The township cannot afford to put in a permanent fix or larger structures, but they do have access to a very large gravel pile. So they just dump more gravel on it, and then the thaw comes and it washes away. Well, the gravel's not so big a deal, but all the clay and silt washes down the river into the Big Sioux and on through the system. So we want to ask permission to apply for this grant from South Dakota Department of Transportation to fix this problem.
so moved by Mr. Garnos. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Johnson. Is there any further questions or discussion? If not, then all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
Next on the open is a motion to acknowledge notice of a raffle to be conducted by the Connington County Republican Women on or after February the 18th, 2006. So could we have a motion to acknowledge the raffle?
So moved.
So moved by Alderman Meisenheimer. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Alderwoman York. Is there any questions or discussions on that? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 5 is to see if the council wishes to do any action on a proposed constitutional amendment that would restrict or prohibit the sale of goods or services by the city. And Tracy, you'd want to do a little brief, open it up?
I can kick it off. And I tried to find this will be a Senate joint resolution. However, according to the Legislative Research Council website this afternoon yet, they had not assigned a number to this. I did email a draft out to you earlier last week, I believe it was, And since that time, I've received a revised draft. In any case, I think this is something that, a constitutional amendment that if it were to pass and actually become law, it is of very serious concern to the city, would have potentially very far-reaching impacts to the services that the city provides to the community. My understanding is that the intention or the impetus for this proposed amendment to the Constitution has to do with the South Dakota Department of Game, Fish, and Parks selling some sort of artwork or prints on their state website. And in reaction to that, the proposed constitutional amendment would prohibit any governmental entity from selling any goods, commodities, or services to the public if those same items or services are available through a private business or a non-governmental entity. And there really is, I guess in my view, trying to kill a flea with a sledgehammer. They may well have identified a problem that the State Department of Game, Fish, and Parks maybe should not have been engaging in. However, the sledgehammer is really going to have some very far-ranging effects if this were to come into effect. The impact potentially on the city could affect our ambulance service that we were discussing potentially. Many communities are served by ambulance services that are not government operated. Restrictions would certainly, I believe, affect our park and recreational facilities, golf course, the community recreation center that we talked about earlier. Many of the services provided by those two departments could potentially fall under the prohibition of this constitutional amendment. Our garbage collection services that the city provides, aircraft hangar rental, could certainly be perceived and under this language be considered illegally or improperly competing with private business. And depending on how the language in the proposed constitutional amendment might be interpreted, the impacts could range as far as our public schools competing with private schools available in the community in conflict with the Constitution. The city's snow removal services could potentially be no longer permitted under the state constitution. Many of the services that are performed by the departments here in City Hall could conceivably be performed or offered and provided to the city by consultants, by financial consultants or consulting engineers. Law firms in town can certainly provide the same type of service provided by our city attorney. There are a whole host of things, and while on the surface of it, it may sound like a very good idea that government ought not to be competing with private business. As you really examine it and look at the details of this and what the potential impacts are, I think it presents very potentially very damaging consequences to cities across the state. And as a member of the Municipal League Board, I can tell you that the South Dakota Municipal League is going to fight this tooth and nail, and I would hope that the council would take some formal position on this in opposition to this proposed amendment. I guess with that, I'll be quiet and try to answer any questions you might have, but I'll turn it back to you, Mayor, for discussion.
Another area that is deeply concerning me is that it can even, ramifications can even reach into industrial development. And this is something that we're getting along pretty well with the system we have, and I would so move that we support the League of Municipalities on their motion to resist.
I would second that.
Seconded by Alderwoman York. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think one of our biggest impacts would be with the utilities. Anybody could come in and sell electric or gas to any part of the city or the whole city if they...
Anyone else have a comment? If not, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next we go on to old business. And we have one item, which is the renewal of the boilers and machinery equipment breakdown insurance policy for a 13-month period and authorization to pay the premium. Tracy?
Thank you. Really, two issues I want to point out to you. One, this is a request to renew for a 13-month period. The reason for that is that this policy is works really kind of hand in hand with our property insurance coverage. And our property insurance policy runs from February 1st to February 1st. However, this policy has been, for the boiler and machinery and equipment breakdown, has been on a calendar year basis. So I'd like to get the two in sync with one another. They do insure the same property, although for different types of losses. I think going forward it will be beneficial to the city to have both running on the same 12-month period. The other issue is a payment of the premium. I had this on a previous agenda, and at my request, the council delayed action on it. We've now resolved the issue with regard to the premium. In past years, the premium has been based on only selected locations where the city actually had boilers in place, and the policy fairly recently was broadened to ensure many other types of losses that aren't necessarily related to boilers. And so the premium now under the policy is based on the same level of, or same limits that we have under our building property, or building policy. Just to give you an idea of the difference, the total value of all buildings that the city insures for the city as well as the municipal utilities this year is about $63.7 million. Previously insured under our boiler and machinery policy was about a third of that, a little over $20 million. And so the change, or the comprehensiveness of the coverage has expanded considerably under the new policy. However, along with that, the premium has increased rather substantially as well. The total premium last year that the city and the utilities paid was about $6,300. The earlier renewal quote that we got for a 12-month policy was about $12,600, and after kind of wrangling a bit with the insurance company, the 13-month renewal for the policy with a $63 million limit, we've agreed on $11,742 total. Of that, the city's share would be $7,632. So it still represents, in terms of percentages, a pretty significant increase. Overall, it's a $5,400 increase. The municipal utility share of the increase is about $1,800. So it's going to cost the city budget about $3,600 more than it did a year ago, but arguably we have much broader protection. Now, I think one of the tasks we expect to undertake between now and the next renewal time is to really identify whether or not this coverage is something that's appropriate for all of the city's locations, and try to identify those where it's appropriate and those where it's not, and try to not be overinsured but still be prudent about the protection that we do have.
Thank you, Tracy. So I have a motion then to authorize the payment to the premium.
So moved.
So moved by Alderman Johnson. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Alderwoman Arbogast. Is there any further discussion or questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Tracy. Item number 13 is any new business. Is there any new business to come before the council? Are there any liaison member reports? There will be no executive session this evening, and with that, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
So moved by Alderman Heller, and seconded by Alderman Giselbeck, and all in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned.